Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on the channel. Today we are wrapping up May with a reading update. I'm going to talk about all 15 books that I read over May, and I'm going to try and be as concise as I can be, but like usual, I always have a lot to say about books that I enjoyed and didn't enjoy, and over the month of May I definitely had a bit of both. So let's get straight into the May stats. If you've already watched my wrap up in my journal, you would have seen some of these stats, but for those who haven't, I read a total of 15 books in May. I read 5,181 pages, which is a little lower than a couple of months this year. I have definitely been reading a lot more recently, so it was a little bit of a slower month. I had an average rating of 3.6, which I think is the lowest of the year. I'm not actually quite sure off the top of my head, but it is lower than some of the other months. Like usual, my most read was ebook. I did end up DNFing one book, and I sampled 5, which means I didn't get past 10%, so I don't see them as a way of DNFing. So I just end up classing them as a sampled, and then I did 5 out of the 7 TBR vending machine prompts. So I was reading the last 2 prompts or books right up to the very last day. I ended up finishing one on the 1st of June, and I actually still haven't finished the other one. I've had to put it on the back burner while I get through some arcs. So I was pretty impressed with getting through as many as I did, considering I also had quite a wee break in the month for personal time. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the overall stats. Let's get into talking about the books before I prattle on too much about this. So the first book of May that I finished was The North Wind by Alexandria Warwick. Now this was re-released. It's already out in stores here in New Zealand. I've actually seen copies of it and scowled at it. I didn't have a good time. You can see on the screen that I gave this 2.5 stars. I found The North Wind just wasn't for me. It was full of inconsistencies, and for this to be re-released under traditional publishing, I was quite surprised by the lack of editing in some areas to the story. The inconsistencies really riddled the world building the most, and they were small issues, but it would be something like in the beginning, I remember the main female character talking about how they had no livestock left, they had no animals to use to eat meat from, and then in the next sentence she was talking about how she might ask one of the villagers to borrow their horse. So I was a bit like, how do they keep a horse alive if they've not got any other livestock? So yeah, little things like that, but because there were so many of them, it added up, and I started to see them a bit more as obstacles to enjoy the story, because I was continuously being shown that things didn't add up. I also just found the main female character to be incredibly unlikable, because she is the main voice of the story. I ended up spending a lot of time being quite put off by what she was saying and just never really relating to it. So I do admit to skimming some of it because I just wasn't interested. So I think that I'll leave this review here, but I didn't enjoy myself and I won't be continuing on with the series. So the next book that I completed was another e-arc. It was The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. I was really looking forward to this one. It sounded really, really good in vibes. I really enjoy a good cozy fantasy, but I'm not so sure that low stakes fantasy is for me, and this is definitely one of those. I like to describe this book as, you know, those Nintendo Switch cozy fantasy games like Animal Crossing and all the other things where you have like your own little farm, you raise chickens on them, you farm on it, you do gardening, like little things like that. I feel like this is that in a book. So we're following Marigold, and she ends up leaving her home and goes to an isle where she essentially has to raise a garden and keep it alive and deal with the beehives, and just like she's the honey witch, so she needs to look after the realm, and that will help her look after the people on the island. I did struggle with this one. Again, I gave it 3 stars. There were moments where I did enjoy it, but this one really struggled for me in like audience level. So on one side of things, especially the beginning, I felt like this read very much so like a middle grade quest novel. And then on the other hand, you have a sapphic romantic element to the story, and this is an adult romance. So you you can't really put a middle grade and a sapphic adult romance together, but that's kind of what happened here, and that is why I didn't enjoy myself. I also mentioned before that low stakes just doesn't seem to be for me, because there wasn't enough going on here for me to keep an interest for a lot of the book. I was not interested until about 60% in, and by that point I really didn't care for the main female character. I did end up having a portion where I started to get involved again, and then I ended up finding the ending to be just really lackluster. So yeah, again, 3 stars. I wanted to like this more than I actually did. So the next book I finished was What Are Friends For by Sarah Sutton. This is book 1 in the Love in Fenton County series. I gave this 3 stars. It is a YA romance, and you guessed it, it's a friends to lovers story. Essentially, the main female character ends up in a closet with her best friend without realizing it, thinking it was someone else, and they end up having the best kiss ever, and then the fallout of that and how their friendship is around that, because she knows that it was him, but he didn't know that it was her. Um, I'm only picking this up because I had it on my Kindle for a Stuff Your Kindle day. I got it for free, and I'm trying to work through my Kindle books through a challenge this year. So I ended up drawing out the number that I corresponded to this book, and that's the only reason I read it. I have unhauled it from my Kindle. I mean, I didn't hate it. I gave it 3 stars. It was just average, very predictable. I didn't like some of the actions of the main female character, but overall, it was okay to read. I finished it, so that's a big thing for me with some of these books. And yeah, I can't say if I would recommend it or not. I just had an okay time with it. The next book that I completed was Curious Tides by Pascal Lassalle. This is book 1 in the Drowned Gods series. This is a dark academia fantasy. That's what it's been marketed as. I did give this 2.5 stars. I promise you I didn't just give everything below 3 stars in the month of May, but unfortunately this was another one that fell really flat for me. And I wasn't the only one in the book club. Bar one person, we all gave it either 2.5 or 2 stars. And that was down to the fact that the main female character was just really unlikable. I've never read a character that I've hated so much from the beginning that gets to carry through being like a chosen one and everything like that. Like, it was just really unfortunate that the author chose to write this character this way. I also feel like the book could have been cut down in length. It is 544 pages long, and nothing really happens until the very end of the book that is warrantable to stay at that length. So I could see this being more like 350 pages if we cut out a lot of the unnecessary repetition. I don't want to hate on it too much and get into the reasons why, because it is very like personal to the storyline, and like, if you've not read this, I don't want to give anything away, but I did find that main female protagonist incredibly irksome and very hard to feel any sympathy for. And there was only one character in this world that I absolutely would read again, and his name is Kai. Absolutely loved him so much and would read an entire book about him. But unfortunately, he's just a side character. So whether or not that's just because he's a side character, or if she wrote it, the author wrote him into a main character spot, if he would still stay as intriguing as he was, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is a big miss for me. Finally, a book that I gave 5 stars to, and I absolutely enjoyed this so much. Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt was my first time reading anything by this author. I had seen this book floating around ever since it was released and just never got around to it, and picked it up on a whim from the library as an audiobook and had the best time reading this story. It's not often that I get to enjoy a really balanced romance where the character development, the emotional connection and vulnerability, humor, romantic tension and passion, and finding your own people, and overall pacing of the story all matches up so well. But in this case, it did, and I had a fantastic time reading this. I loved that the main characters both got a point of view. We get to see how they're both feeling, how they both love each other and the ways that they do. And I really enjoyed the fact that the main male character was a single dad to a child who is deaf, and yet did such a fantastic job of representing this type of disability in a novel, but also liberating the character. It was just so fantastically done, and if you haven't picked this up and romance is your thing, I highly recommend picking up Funny Feelings as soon as you can. Another one of the books I picked up in a Stuff Your Kindle day and ended up rolling from the Kindle takedown jar was The Secret Witch of Kriegspiel by S.L. Prater. This is a fantasy romance. It is a bit of a spicy book, definitely more spicier than the 𝓤𝓲 series by the same author. And this follows a witch who ends up getting married, I think, to a priest. The magic system in this was a little bit weird. I must admit that I came into this not reading book one because it said that it could be a standalone and that the world is just interconnected, but I do feel like I'm missing some foundation steps to the magic system and the overall world system from book one. So if you are going to start the series, I highly recommend from book one. But like I mentioned, I was just doing this because it was sitting on my Kindle. I had an okay time with it. I do really enjoy the way that this author writes, but when I compare this to the other books that I've read by her, both the 𝓤𝓲 series I've started, and then also her newest release, 𝓤𝓽𝓮 of Ill Repute. This just doesn't compare to the same writing, and I'm not sure if this was written earlier than those two series. Well, obviously the newest one it is, but I did find myself not enjoying this one as much, but I still enjoyed the banter and the overall connection between the main characters. Here's where it comes down to expectation versus reality in a really unfortunate way. I think I overhyped The God and the Gumio by Sophie Kim up in my head when I applied for it as an ARC. I really enjoy Korean folklore and culture, and I was super excited for this book, beyond excited actually. I remember when I got the accepted note about receiving it, I squealed. I was just so happy to have this book. And unfortunately, I found that the main characters just really let this down. It seems to be that I read a lot of books in May where the main character development was just not on par for what I was expecting. I don't know if that's a little bit like it's a me problem. It might have been, but one of my good Bookster pals read this with me as well because she also got the ARC and gave it the same rating. So I'm not sure in this case if that's the full truth that it was me and not the book. However, this has the vibes, but just fails to execute them a little bit. I really did enjoy the fact that the author just wrote the Korean terms for like ghost and goblin and all that into the book, and there is a list of what they represent at the start of the book, I believe, but I already knew what they were, and it was just really interesting to see just them being slapped in there and not being explained fully, which I appreciated. It kept in vibe with the book, but again, the main characters, this is supposed to be an enemies to lovers. It's a bit grey on that area, and I did find the main female character especially to be quite exasperating, and thus it let down on the romance aspect of the book, but I did enjoy like the main quest part of the story, trying to figure out the murders and the demon stuff, which was really, really interesting. But yeah, failed to keep me interested enough to give it more than 3.5 stars. However, the ending has me hooked, and I cannot wait for book 2. So definitely going to be continuing this series. So I will be honest, as I always am with all my reviews, I'm not anything but honest, that I kind of hummed and hawed about whether I was going to share my review on this or not, considering that the timing for this video with the discussion or discourse around this author and AI, and how strongly I believe AI is not what we need in our future, especially in the author community and in the book industry. Um, yeah, I struggled to think of whether or not I wanted to share this, but I will keep it as brief as possible. I was told by another friend in the Bookstagram community that this novella in the Powerless trilogy was made with a lot of vital information to continue the series. Now, I'm going to be transparent. I won't be continuing the series after hearing what this author supports, but at the point of reading this, I didn't hear that, I didn't know it, so I was still planning to continue on because I kind of wanted to know what happened next, even though I didn't enjoy book 1 that much. I also gave it 3 stars. However, if you hear that this gives vital information, you don't need to read this. You already know what happens to the character, the main female character in this. It's a very tragic story, but there's nothing really learnt that can build upon in the next book in the series that can't be just wrapped up within like a paragraph. There is no overall vital information aside from what the main male character of this storyline has as a gift. That's all there is to it, and it could easily be shared in a paragraph. So please don't waste your time on this if you are not interested in reading about the tragedy of the main female character, or you're just not going to continue with the series or feel like you're on the fence about it. Yeah, I feel like I wasted time reading this, and I was quite frustrated when I found that there was no vital information after being sold on the fact that there was a lot of it. Another 3.5-star read was The Dating Playbook by 𝓤𝓲 Now, I've read this series out of order. I read book 3 first and enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and so when I saw that my library had picked up the audiobook for book 2, I was excited because I did enjoy book 3 a lot. Unfortunately, this one didn't really resonate with me as much as I had hoped. This follows 2 characters. One is a footballer, like a professional footballer who's injured, and the other is a fitness guru but doesn't have a qualification to be training anyone at this point. And I just found that a lot of the elements with this story kind of rubbed me the wrong way, especially with the main female character. It seems to be a running trend in the month of May, but yeah, she just had some issues that I didn't quite gel with. The romance is cute enough, the storyline is very predictable, and the spice is placed in a place where it's not too out of line, but I just didn't really get fully involved. I would say this is average, but wasn't as bad as some other books that I've read recently, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Guys, we're on to the home stretch. This is book 11, and this is the second 5-star read of May. It is Savor It by Tara DeWitt. I actually didn't know, well, I didn't connect that this was the same author as Funny Feelings, and I applied for this a couple of months ago as an ARC and received it, and was looking forward to it because it sounded good. It's a small town romance between someone who has lived there her whole life and is trying to re-establish herself in a community that sees her as someone who was with the golden boy of the township. And then you have an outsider coming in who's the main male character who is struggling with his career as a chef, and has been sent for the summer to the small town to build up a restaurant, which putting it aside here, that little portion of the restaurant side of things, it made no sense to me in the grand scheme of things, but that's nothing that we need to worry about. Again, I gave this 5 stars because Tara DeWitt seems to be really good at balancing these romances with the emotional connection and the passion. This one was definitely more spicy than Funny Feelings, and it was really going for it at some points. But I think it really suited the characters and their emotional journey and connection with each other. I really enjoyed this story a great deal, and I think if you haven't picked it up, please try and add this to your TBR. It's just come out, and if you like small town romances, you won't be let down by this one. Another 5 star read right after one. This is A Rivalry of Hearts by, I hope I'm saying this right, 𝓤𝓮𝓻 𝓤𝓷𝓬. This is a fantasy romance, adult fantasy romance, and it's set in a Fae realm. This is book 1 in the 𝓤𝓲𝓭 𝓬𝓭 series, and I'm super excited for the series. This is my first time reading anything by this author. I have been kind of eyeing her books over the last few months, and when I saw the concept for this book, I was absolutely smitten. I love a good whimsy banter fae fantasy, and this is exactly what it is. You get dual point of view, which I loved. This is an academic rivals to lovers, so they're both going for the same contract for a publishing deal. They've both got their reasons for it, and they know that they're both contenders for winning it, so they decide to do a drunken bet that has a sexual element to it, and I really liked this. It is very steamy at times, and I think it balances out well with the banter and the character development, but this is definitely a romp that's fun, and I enjoyed reading it over a few days. I wanted to consume it, but at the same time sort of savor it, and so it was good that I got a little bit busy around the days that I was reading this so I could read it at night. I was kicking my sheets at some of the points of this book. Like, I was having a good time. I was like squealing and stuff. So that doesn't happen often, and I was having a good time. So if I'm doing that, I'm highly recommending this book to you. Can you tell that I'm getting a little bit tired of talking and tongue twisted? The next book I'm talking about today is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. Now, this is sold as a book where the main female character ends up dying at the start of the book, and she's given a certain amount of time to revive her life by finding and kissing her true love. And this is this sounded really cute to me, and that's why I applied for it as an ARC. I really enjoy books that have a ghost element to it. I'm not sure why. I think that just stems from reading a lot of Mika Bo when I was a kid and really enjoying ghost stories. But I found this one really frustrating to enjoy, and that is down to, once again, the main female character just not being really likable at all. So I knew that some of the reasonings behind her behaviour was because of the trauma that she had experienced and the abandonment issues that she had, but the way that she treated people overall was just really made her really unlikable and unrelatable to me. I also struggle with some books that have like British humour in it. I actually find this weird because I grew up in a world where British comedy, TV, and music was live streamed into our country, so I consumed a lot of it when I was younger, but reading it, I just don't seem to gel with. I find them overly waffling, and the characters to just talk too much, kind of probably like how I am as a person, and I find that exasperating at times, so putting it into a book, I don't want to really read it. So, yeah, I found this one hard to love. It definitely had some elements of like a satisfying concept. I really liked the idea of Delphi coming back to life after being so holed up in her own world, but the delivery of the main character just didn't satisfy me enough to enjoy this more than a 3.5 stars. The saddest thing about making these videos is that you start to notice the trends. When you've read a book that you've really enjoyed, you can really sort of eloquently, well, I hope it's eloquent enough, share the thoughts of why you enjoyed something, and then when you've read something that you didn't enjoy, there's a lot more to say. And unfortunately, in the case of How the King of Our Fame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black, this was a reread and already gave it 5 stars the first time round. I'm giving it 5 stars again. This was just a really cozy comfort return to the Folk of the Air series. I was rereading the entire series to get ready for the companion series or the subsequent series with the younger generation in this world, and I just really enjoyed it. I don't have a lot to say. I love Carden. He's one of my favourite main male characters. I love the complexities of his character development and getting to understand a bit more from his point of view, since we spend a lot of time in Jude's narration in the main part of this series. And I'm sad that I'm now moving on to characters where he won't be like at the front of the storyline. Yeah, I had a really good time and I don't have much more to say. So once again, a 5 star read gets a very short review and a 2.5 star review gets a lot more airtime. But that's just how it goes. Two books left, and one was Lured by the Dusk by Angela J. Ford. This is a book that I picked up again as a Stuff Your Kindle Day read, and it is a well, it's marketed as a Dracula versus Pied Piper retelling, and I definitely get the Pied Piper part, but I don't get the Dracula part, and that was kind of a letdown. Little story with this book: my best friend, well, one of them, is named Tanith, and that is the main female character in this world, in this book, sorry. And she would 100% star in a gothic romance. Like, hands down, you've got Dracula there, she will be there. Like, it's the most perfect world for her. So, of course, I put this book up because of her and the fact that this is a gothic romance slash paranormal fantasy. Um, yeah, unfortunately, I gave this 3 stars. It was just okay. Um, I did find myself more exasperated as I read on. The insta love was insta loving. The storyline had a lot of inconsistencies in it, and I feel like overall I should have DNF'd this. I kept carrying on and then going, I feel like I need to DNF this. And then flipping a page and reading a little bit more and getting a little bit more exasperated, but then also involved in the storyline. It's kind of like annoying when that happens. And so by the time I got to the point in the storyline where I was really done, it was too late to DNF it. So I just quickly finished it, and I will not be continuing on with this series. Like with a couple of other books in this month of May, these were classed as standalones in an interconnected world. I don't think that this really showed other worlds off enough. This did feel very much so like a standalone in an interconnected series, but I don't have any interest in picking up books 1 or 2 or any after this one either. So we're at the last book, and it is Everyone is Beautiful by 𝓬𝓮 𝓬𝓮. This is one of her earlier reads, and it is a contemporary novel. I wouldn't really class this as a romance. There is like an element to the storyline about reconnecting with her husband for the main female character, but overall, this is just a story about life, and some of the messages in this book were quite good. There are there is an overall message of everyone being flawed and life can bring you beauty and pain. People can hurt you and champion for you, and finding your people is vital. But on a bare bones level, the overall thought of this book was something that a lot of people could like do with being reminded about in day-to-day life. And this came to me at a point where I was burnt out. So some of the messages really resonated with me, but overall I can't really identify myself in the main female character. I'm not a mother. Well, I've never birthed any children of my own yet, but I do take care of 2 people every day. So I do have some of the elements that Lainey, the main female character, was going through. But I just found myself not able to connect with some of the actions she made and the miscommunication on page with some people. And I just found her struggles a little bit tedious at times. I also feel like there should have been more time spent on the marriage recovery, and getting to see more with her husband, and that would have made the angst and the redemption feel a bit more worthwhile overall. I did pick this up for one of my readathon prompts for the year. I needed the word every in the title, and believe me, I didn't realize it would be so hard to find a book with the word every in it that I haven't read already. So this is the one that I found and was short enough to read. I did it all in one day. So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I'm so glad that I managed to get through all 15 reads within 35 minutes. This has actually just hit the 30-minute mark. I hope that I didn't talk too much about the negative books. I do find that a lot of people, including myself, tend to spend more airtime on explaining why we didn't enjoy a book as opposed to why we did enjoy a book, and I'd really like to change that going forward. But I am on a time crunch to give this to you all. These are my honest thoughts. I always do have more to talk about when I didn't enjoy a book, and I'm not sure why that happens. I'll try to balance that out. But until we next meet, I hope you have fun reading or journaling, just living. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in a new video sometime very soon. Bye, everyone.